And finally, in the last lecture, lecture 6, we will be discussing the Financial Intelligence Center.
The Financial Intelligence Center, as said before, deals with money laundering. You need to ensure your country has money laundering controls because you don't want your financial institution being used for terrorist financing and for money laundering from other countries in the world. So the main aspect of money laundering that you keep in mind is your KYC. Know your client. Have some form of identity. Know where the money is coming from. Because what is the point of money laundering? Money laundering is to conceal where the money came from because it came from somewhere illegal. So if you know your client and you know where the money is coming from, you will be able to see if the money came from somewhere illegal. Paper trails must always be preserved, and if something red flags and says there is money laundering going on here, if the money is derived from illegal activities, or it's very difficult to see the identity of your clients, this must be reported. The Council for Overseeing Recognized and Statutory Ombudsman Schemes. So there is an ombud in the South African financial markets. It's applicable to banking and non-banking financial institutions. So the ombud scheme tries to raise consumer awareness. How do they do that? They provide education programs, public services announcements, because at the end of the day, the regulation can be put in place to protect the consumer. But if the consumer does not make correct decisions themselves, it is very difficult to ensure that the consumer is protected. So for example, when signing a credit agreement, you need to ensure that you have explained the credit agreement to the client. However, if the client does not understand the credit agreement, but you have explained it to them, what position are you in there? So education of consumers is very important. I have placed an article up. It is called A Safer Financial Sector to Serve South Africa Better. This is a National Treasury document. What I would like you to pick up from this document is the impact that the crisis had on South Africa. So I have discussed this briefly, but here specifically in this document, I would like you to see how South Africa was sheltered from the financial crisis due to various factors. For example, the author is of the opinion that we have sound financial regulation which protected us from the crisis. Limited exposure to foreign assets due to exchange control. If you think of South Africa at that time, there was still exchange control regulation in place. Risk management at banks. Ring fencing of assets. So for example, if you were a foreign bank in South Africa, you had to have a local subsidiary before you could operate. Finally, transparency and the high level of disclosure in South Africa. I am also of the specific opinion that South Africa geographically is very far away from the rest of the world. So even though things move very quickly and there's internet, very often we are a little bit isolated in our own little corner of the world, because you must think as a South African how expensive it is to travel. So those implications, being geographically far away, carry out into other sections of our lives. When you look at developments in South Africa around the world, so after the crisis, regulation was strengthened because people were of the opinion that because there was not enough regulation, the markets failed. So at the moment there's this movement towards Twin Peaks so that two committees can coordinate, right? So if you look at the SARB, they look at the macro-prudential supervision, whereas the FSAC will look at more microprudential. Their mandate is to regulate specific conduct in the market. Also, if you look at Basel, which will be covered in Financial Markets Transactions B, that deals with banking regulations and capital requirements. In conclusion, if you look at the crisis itself, it highlighted the vulnerabilities of the sector worldwide. So regulation was kind of targeted and said there was not enough regulation to mitigate the risk. However, some people are of the view that too much regulation can also cause a crisis. But in this situation, it was stated that because of the lack of regulations and consumers were not protected and the free availability of credit, that caused the financial institution collapse. So thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next session.